Well, today I want to call out something that I think needs some attention. And in order to do this, we need to establish a couple of things. Number one, I am my own blind person. I do not speak for other blind people. This is just my experience specifically. And with that in mind, I want people to understand that, kind of on the flip side, that disability is a really broad term, and that everybody who experiences a disability of any description is going to do so in a different way from others. That includes yours truly. So today, I kind of want to talk about something that happened to me a couple of months ago relating to a previous job. And I'm going to do my best to keep things professional and courteous while still calling out the crux of the issue. And if you read the title, we're talking about being uncomfortable with inaccessibility and how ableist views can come from that. And this is something that I think is really, really prevalent. And the more I sit down and put thought to it and think about and reflect on experiences I've had, the more prevalent this situation becomes. This was just a really outward-facing example. So, I have talked about this job on the channel before in a video that I will link in the description, where I talked about a lighting situation that happened around some surgeries that I had, and the unwillingness and inaction of that job in following up on and really doing their due diligence to make sure that I had the accommodations that I needed. And this situation is kind of the penultimate of that. And so I'll preface it by saying I no longer work here, haven't for more than a year, almost going on a year and a half at this point. And I have given those involved the opportunity, the due diligence, the time, and the presence of mind to talk about this if they would have chosen to do so with me in a professional way. And that opportunity wasn't taken. And so, to me, the best thing I can do from here is to reach out to this community, to other people, and tell this story in hopes that other people won't have to fall into an experience like this. Because it's dehumanizing, it's frustrating, it's something that I really hope I don't have to experience again, but I probably will. And I know that other disabled people, whether blind or not, will have experienced or will experience at some point. And I think part one of this comes from an inert need for able-bodied people to look at us and see difference before they see a human being. And for me, this story really starts on me getting this job. I remember walking in, I don't remember if it was for my interview proper or around my first day, and I was having a meeting with the principal of this school, and another person who worked there, who was going to be in a similar position to myself, walked in and essentially questioned my ability to do the job on the spot because of my visual impairment. Not in so many words, but by the vocally raised eyebrows, the surprise, and then kind of probing on things that they really didn't have business asking about. And again, in hindsight, this should have been the start of things to come, and that I would have noticed, and it was not. Because I was excited to have a new job, I was excited to work with new coworkers, I was excited to have a new classroom full of kiddos. And as we started the school year, there were more and more of these seemingly small incidents that I did my best to navigate as best I could, and I'm going to talk about those. So the first one was the Oatmeal Incident, which I think I've also made a video on, which was, in very brief, no one communicated that there was a bowl of oatmeal that was located near the edge of a table. I went to go sit down and flipped the bowl of oatmeal on the floor because I didn't know it was there. And obviously I felt bad. I didn't want to ruin someone's breakfast. But it was also the issue of, okay, lesson learned, right? I am going to be working with this person and we just need to work on our communication. And I kind of articulated that after the incident. Hey, it would just be really helpful if there's something that needs communicating, just let me know so that I can navigate around it or we can compromise on a solution. And throughout the start of the school year, that was a huge struggle. For example, one day I went and put a closet together in our room in a way that I thought made sense for where extra materials might be kept and kind of how to organize a space in a way that made sense. I then went up, had lunch, came back, and the closet was completely rearranged. And it wasn't just that someone, felt they had a better idea, because I'm all for collaboratively organizing and putting together a classroom. I was a paraprofessional, so I'm not going to pretend I'm the lead teacher and I suddenly control everything. However, if I'm asked to grab, for example, an extra can of Play-Doh or an extra pair of scissors out of the closet and someone rearranges them, I now don't know where those things are, thus it makes me less effective at doing my job. And there were so many things like this where a change would be made, the classroom would be rearranged, and I really tried to talk about these things and say, hey, I need to know, I need to understand the rationale behind things so that I can navigate a space effectively. I got to the point fairly early on in the year where I actually had to start using my cane in the classroom. And that was really alarming to me because I normally, when I get into a space that I know very well, especially if it is a space that I'm in for, multiple hours in a stretch and things aren't going to move around as much, I tend to not use my cane because I'm comfortable. And all of a sudden here I am having to use my cane around my room because things were being moved. There was chairs and tables that got moved around, significantly. And in about November of that school year, I was helping to put some of my kids down for nap, which just entails me sitting with them and, rubbing backs. These are preschoolers. And was doing that and went to go get up. And there was a table that must have gotten moved about 6 inches in a direction that I wasn't expecting. And I had my head down, rubbing the kids back and making sure they were all right. And I came up and bang, I hit right here on my nose, right on the corner of the table because it was not where I thought it was supposed to be. And that hurt, obviously, but it was also a wake-up call of okay, maybe I'm having some vision changes. I don't know what's going on. Maybe this was a me thing. And so I went to the eye doctor and I ended up having a glaucoma surgery. I still am not quite sure if that was actually a visual change or if that was, a table that got shifted. Either way, it was a reason for me to start paying more attention and paying attention to what I needed, articulating that in a stronger way, while still saying I'm more than capable of doing so many aspects of this job if things are laid out in a way that allow for my success. And at so many points, that just didn't happen. Now, to play the other fiddle for a moment, I had a couple of teachers, one of whom was a lot more willing to work with me and willing to come to the table and have conversations that at times were still rough. But I would rather have a process and have that process be uncomfortable, which is a point I'm going to get back to, than to have no process at all. For navigating, quite frankly, things that start off as ignorance and end as outright ableism if not taken care of properly. And it should not be my duty every second of every day to justify my own existence or my own ability to do a job just because I present in a different way how I do things, or because I look at a situation and may navigate it in a way that may be alternative to what an able-bodied person might do. And as a paraprofessional, the first thing every single day on my mind is my kids. What we're going to do, what we're going to play, how we're going to do things. And, the second thing is how can I create that environment in a way that is engaging for my kids? I brought a Bluetooth speaker and hooked up sounds for air traffic control one day because we were talking all about airplanes. And so I would create that environment using audio in my classroom. I made an entire video for my kids about safety in street crossings and how you do that as someone with a disability in order to work on the concept of normalizing disability for my kids. I read books to my kids in Braille every day because I felt like it was important that they hear stories and see them read in a way that represented the way I interact with the world, not the way that I'm forced to. And so I'm not going to like zoom in and read things really close unless I have no choice, because that's the way I do things. And I think it's important that kids see that. And so everything that I tried to do during this job was in service of that. And there were so many things and so many times where the contrary was presented to me. I had one teacher who couldn't count kids. Now, I can't do a head count. I'm blind. But I know, for example, if you say, hey, I'm going to take Jill and Beverly to the bathroom, you have 10. I now know I'm in a classroom of 12, 2 are gone, thus I'm left with 10. Also, you articulated as much. Thank you. Be on your way, be free. And there were people that would not do that. They would just either come take kids, they wouldn't articulate things. And it felt like I was being worked around more, especially towards the latter part of this job, than I was being worked with. I was somehow a burden, and a burden that couldn't be conversated with, that couldn't be brought to the table for solutions. I'll give you an example of a couple of things that happened that were, again, early on and really should have been red flags. So we had a piece of paper I had to sign from our nurse's office, essentially explaining that I understood the EpiPen and inhaler needs of some of our students. And I'm CPR first aid certified, have been for a number of years. And so I'm trained also on the use of an EpiPen. Not as much with an inhaler, but I can do it. And the thing that was frustrating was I articulated right away, hey, we have a nurse's office with the inhalers and EpiPens of these kids. There were kids in different grade levels that had different needs, one of whom was mine, and they had an EpiPen. And so I was prepared from a conceptual level to administer the Epi as needed. I understood what the situation was that called for the administration of an EpiPen. And all I needed to make sure that this puzzle was complete was to make sure that that was labeled properly. And so I asked for Braille label paper so that I could hand Braille my own labels for the nurse's office for the EpiPens and inhalers, but also for things like Band-Aids or ice packs so that I could restock the first aid kit that I carry with me. And there's another aspect of it. I carry my own first aid kit very intentionally because it is organized in a way that I understand. Because I know exactly where I've put the Band-Aids as compared to the gloves, as compared to the gauze or the ice packs. And so I would like to have my own so that when that emergency situation, not just the skin on the playground, but last summer I had a situation where emergency medical services had to be brought to a situation. And because I had my kit, this was at a different job, but I was able to administer enough aid that we were able to kind of bridge the gap. And so I asked for this Braille label paper and never received it. And after a certain amount of weeks, I kind of went back and I was like, hey, I don't know what happened here, but I need this paper. And they said, oh, we are not sure, it might have gotten lost. And that was never communicated to me. And not only that, but I was brought in, this was actually way before I was told it was even lost. I was brought into the office. I was told, you have to sign this piece of paper that talks about your understanding of the medical procedures. And I said, I know that. I've been informed. But what I need is the labeling of this nurse's office so that I feel like I can carry out the duties as per the procedures in a way that allows me to interface equally and equitably with the material in the nurse's office. And I was essentially told that if I didn't sign the paper, I couldn't work. And so I had to sign it. And I knew what to do, but it was so frustrating to just be asking for, hey, I just need access to this thing so that I feel comfortable. How would you like to go into that room with the lights off and have to pick and hope that nobody placed the wrong thing on the wrong shelf and have to pick that in a life-saving situation? So we start to form a picture of a place that while apparently being equal opportunity, presented in a way that started to put up blocks and started to put up barriers. And when I would bring them up and say, hey, I'm calling this out, I need something different here, I was either flat ignored or essentially kind of worked around until I came around. And it got really, really frustrating. And it was a lot. And so I ended up leaving that job. Just all of these things and several others put together, it just got to be to the point where even though the work I was doing with the kids was one of the better classrooms I've ever been in, I felt like I had good relationships with my kids. I felt like I was able to be a trusted adult when some of my kids really needed me. But the adults around me didn't see that, didn't want to see that, and didn't care enough to treat me as an equal person. And this wasn't all the time. There were flashes of the contrary. There were great moments and conversations I was able to have that I felt like maybe we're starting to break some barriers down. And then I would be out on the playground, and one day, a teacher who didn't even work with me, I overheard them talking about how me pushing kids on the swings made them nervous because I was blind. And instead of talking to me about it or asking like, hey, I am just curious, like, what do you do to make sure the kids are safe? It does make me a little bit nervous, but like, can you walk me through what you do? They just said it to another coworker and never came to ask me a question about it. And it just felt like, hey, not only do you not trust me, but you're openly saying this out loud to another adult person. Am I not human enough that I deserve to be even acknowledged or asked about this situation? And yeah, so I ended up leaving. And I circled back. I'm still friends with a teacher who works there and has a class. And so I went in to do some reading with their kids. Did my thing. The kids loved it. They love Braille books, which is fun. So they have a few around their classroom, and I get updates about how the kids are using their fingers to read Braille. It's great. So did my thing, read to the kids, was on my way out, had gotten in the car with my then fiance, and someone came over and knocked on the window, and they were like, hey, can I talk to you? And I was like, sure. This was someone I had worked with briefly. And so I got out of the car, and I was basically told that everyone in the building was really uncomfortable with me being there because I had kind of called out the lighting situation at that job, and that nobody was comfortable with me being in the building, and that it might be best that I not come back. And when this conversation started, I was really tempted to just fold, for lack of a better term, and say, fine, whatever, I'm just gonna go. But I couldn't. I said, the reason that I called out this situation is because, number one, it happened, and I'm not going to sugarcoat or deny the reality of being made to feel subhuman and uncomfortable in my own job, especially because I don't work here anymore, and I did not name names. I did not, disclose the school, anything like that, and I did that very intentionally. And essentially the reply was, well, but it was still just very uncomfortable, and, we don't feel, everybody is so uncomfortable. And so you might want to either not come back and I kind of stopped her at that point. I said, hey, if someone wants to have a professional conversation, I'm more than willing to come in and have that conversation with people who are so incredibly uncomfortable with me. I'd be happy to work towards dispelling that, because that's part of what I do as an accessibility consultant, actually. And so if that's something that would be of interest, I'm more than happy to do that. And, short of that, the reason that you're uncomfortable is very likely stemming from the fact that inaccessibility and treating someone not as a human being should make you uncomfortable. Because you know what? It made me uncomfortable. And so me talking about that, me giving voice to that, is probably going to hit a little close to home. It's probably going to feel a little uncomfortable. And that is probably a sign that something needs to change. Now, this is not a situation unique to this job. to this interaction with people, being uncomfortable when things are not equal, when things are not equitable, when things are not accessible, is the canary in the coal mine. And this is what I wanted to get to today. Being uncomfortable is your physiological response to something being wrong, to something just not quite clicking in the way that it's supposed to click. And so if you're uncomfortable with me saying that, hey, when I was here, I wasn't treated as a person and it felt uncomfortable and I need to call out and say, hey, this happened to me. If that makes you uncomfortable, it should. I'm glad it makes you uncomfortable, because actually you being uncomfortable and me being uncomfortable is the first step to coming to the table and actually meeting in the middle, sitting at an uncomfortable table in uncomfortable chairs, is where we start to move forward. And that's the way I tried to talk to this person. And I said, hey, I'm more than happy to, schedule a time so you can pass along my information. In fact, they probably still have it because they worked there. And I'd be happy to come in and have that conversation. That was about 3 months ago at this point, and I have heard absolutely nothing. And it just felt, number one, I was confronted in a parking lot. Partially with the rationale that, I didn't want to have this conversation over the lunch table because I was there over lunch and then a little bit after. But there was hallways, there was offices, there was plenty of spaces where someone could have asked for a private word instead of waiting until I was literally in the car backing out of the parking lot. And that tells me that you had the need to say this maybe where other people weren't listening. And that's why I made the offer I made, is to say, hey, we can come to the table and talk about this as adult human beings. And when you're ready to do that, please feel free to come find me. And that's when I go back to some of the things I've done on this channel. When I think about the content I make and why, I think about the fact that my goal is always to be, I don't want to say better, but to be able to create a space where the world can be better through what I do. But despite me having good intentions, the world doesn't function that way all of the time. I would even say most of the time. And despite my best efforts, other people are still going to be a factor in how this is received, what gets done with it. And so the best thing I know how to do, unless someone's going to give me a call and have me come in and work on staff development, work on having conversation about what could have gone better and what they could do better in the future, if they're not going to do that, the best thing I can do is to talk about this in such a way that I hope this functions kind of as a cautionary tale, to be aware of what's going on around you. At my job I have now, a lot of things are still inaccessible. I have been working with our HR person, our director of programs, to facilitate change, and it has been very slow going. And there are times where I have to say something 9 times. But if I think about the impact I've been able to make here organizationally by comparison, when I call something out for being inaccessible, I don't get ignored in the same way. Something, might not be gotten to in a timely manner because we are relatively small, or they might say we don't have the resources to, figure this all out right now, but we're going to come to the table about it. I'm actually right now trying to get things together to do an accessibility related committee because I think we need to do things at all levels. And that's the last point I want to get to, is I know that I'm going to be fighting a losing war, not just a losing battle, but a losing war until such point as accessibility, disability, and representation are placed at every level of an organization for which I work. As one paraprofessional, as one youth development professional at my current job with a disability, I know that I can scream into the void that things need to change. And it might happen really slowly if I'm lucky. But until there's someone in leadership who can identify with some of the problems I'm having, until there is somebody at our executive level with a disability who can look at this and say, I don't understand everything, but I can see how this would be a problem. Until more of my kids with disabilities have a voice in the programming that they are experiencing, in the way that my workplace represents the kids that we serve, I'm going to be fighting a losing war. But that's what I'm going to do. And no amount of being made to feel less than is going to change that for me. I don't care if something isn't going to get done for a year. I'm going to keep pushing on it. I'm going to call it out. I'm going to bring attention to it. I'm going to bring it back around as many times as it takes for something to get done. If it takes getting confronted in a parking lot, I will endure that, because to me, the end goal is to make people understand that I want to help. I want to be part of a solution. But if I've only been part of the problem and you've only been part of the problem, it makes it really hard to start coming and meeting in the middle and having a compromising, adult, professional, human conversation about change. And being uncomfortable, to circle this all back around, I know this has been rambling, but being uncomfortable is, again, your physiological response to something not quite clicking the way it needs to click. And that's okay. I would rather someone be uncomfortable with my existence and ask about it and come to the table and be willing to treat me as a person than to say nothing, to do nothing, or in a more harmful way, to say or do things that go against any progress forward. That's why one of my favorite things to have happen to me, and it doesn't happen every day, but once in a while I'll be out at the store, I'll be around town, and I'll get a little kid, I don't know, somewhere between 3 and 12, and they'll just look at me and go, "What's with the stick?" And to me, that is what we need. Because that is a child noticing something different, not understanding the adult nuances and restrictions that we've placed on language, on confronting things, on political correctness. It's a kid going, why does that person most people don't carry sticks, this one carries a stick? Why? That is a very fair question. And I've had so many parents yank their kids. We don't talk to the man. We leave him alone. I want you to talk to me. Please talk to me. Because that is how we start to facilitate change. That is how we come to the table. And if a 5-year-old in the middle of a grocery store can do that, there is no reason that an adult human being in the workplace can't do the same. So, being uncomfortable, it's the least of your problems, because guess what? I'm uncomfortable. You think I like this? You think this makes me happy to sit and make a video like this? No, it does not. But to me, that initial step of having an adult conversation, and I come back to that phrase because it takes vulnerability for somebody to ask those questions, for me to want to answer those questions, for both of us to enter a conversation knowing that there may or may not be a problem, but that the goal isn't to articulate how intense and bad the problem is. The goal is to work towards solving the problem. And that's not common. But the first sign that that needs to happen is that you feel like something's wrong. And in every job I have ever worked or will ever work, in every social situation that I've really ever been in, the first step to having that conversation is going out on a limb and asking a question, making an observation, or offering to help. And I've had some amazing conversations with people that I never would have talked to otherwise because they weren't afraid to do that. And there are days that I don't want to answer those questions. There are days I want to sit down, have a drink on an evening, and relax. But there are days the world doesn't allow that to happen. And I feel like today, just by proxy of what it is, was kind of one of those days. And I don't know if any of this is really going to make sense or if there's going to be interest from those of you watching this channel in this type of content. But I think it's something that I needed to say, and so I appreciate you indulging me in that. I think this is a space that we need to be able to have these types of conversations. That's what the internet's for. And I appreciate more than 330 of you that have joined me over the last several years on this channel to have sometimes a lot of fun and sometimes conversations like this one. Thank you for taking your time to watch this. I appreciate the recent support just all around on the channel. We're going to lighten up a little bit. Close out, I just appreciate the community that's developing here. It's been fun. I want to do live streams and things like that. I have the ability to do, what do they call it, continuity camera between my phone and my Mac. So if you guys would be interested in some kind of live stream or Q&A type video, something like that, I definitely want to engage the community a little bit more in the channel and what I'm doing. So wanted to throw that out at the end of a heavier video like this. So once again, appreciate all of you for taking the time. If you made it this far, let me know what you think. If you have any questions, comments, queries, theories, ideas, or anything else, please don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon. Peace.